lawyer's tendency, must dispute. Okay, I have a counterpoint. I don't agree with him at all. And the reason is simple. You are the Supreme Court of India. You are the last court of the country. Like it or not, the preamble, amongst others, and the directive principles of state policy have fundamental economic principles in the Constitution. Let's take coal. What was the bulwark on which the bench ultimately delivered the judgment? Article 39, which is prevent monopolistic exploitation, maximize welfare for the economy. Pray tell me, how do you maximize welfare if 210 odd blocks or 204 blocks, whatever the number be, are now sitting with stranded investments, 70 to 80% coming from banks and financial institutions. Even if 20 to 25% coming from private capital, it also is sunk into a real asset which can't be taken away. Whether it is private or public, the whole problem is that the vision of the Supreme Court does get clouded because of two reasons. They face in PILs a court of first instance, issues which they don't and are not equipped to handle the evidentiary burden, and decide issues at the first instance. Unlike a public interest litigation, when you are sitting in a second appeal or a third appeal, the issues of facts have been discerned, expert testimonies on economics, finance, policy have all come, economics, technology, everything has been looked at. And you are now deciding a question of law. Now those people who are trained, equipped and meant to decide questions of law are now forced to look at facts. Why are they forced to look at facts? I think Mr. Iyer has very succinctly put it. When one limb of the state, there are three of them, fails to work, or two of them fail to work, the third one steps forward. And if you ask any judge, he doesn't want to jump there with a hatchet in hand. He jumps in because he feels that here is a case where either there is largesse being exploited, people are taking undue advantage of gaps, they are not being fair in their treatment, etc., etc. So it is not that they are motivated to play mischief. But the hard reality is, we are living at the final stage of a decision which will have impact for the next 10 or 15 years. When you wipe out 100,000, 200,000 crores of investment or put them into question, would you like to look at the economic impact? Would you not? The view of the court largely has been, we don't want to mold relief and apply law looking at what the consequences are. It's a Puritan approach. Problem is, when you are dealing with infrastructure, you are looking at public goods and services, you are looking at scarce capital. It is no longer a private list. It's not about a dispute between him and me about the value of the property, about the rent that I had to pay, whether I got 30% or 70%. It is now a question that there are only four factors of growth in any economy in the world, and they are labor, land and natural resources, capital, and entrepreneurship. We all know without capital, the other three are useless. You can't possibly put land, natural resources, and labor to work unless you have capital. Whether private or public, 70 to 80% comes from public money, which is banks, which is your and my money. It's not the managing director or the chairman's money. And that money now falls into the problem of not being utilized. It is stranded. Dabhol got into trouble because of whatever reasons we all know. In the long and the short of it, the project got mothballed for 5.5 years. When the project was taken over, and that was around 3.5 years of mothballing, NTPC and GAIL had to take over with banks, which is your and my money again, writing off 4,000 crores. Today, they say we have lost 6,500 crores more. That is 10,500 crores wiped out. Anybody held to account? No. GoLogo, Vodafone, 2G. It is time that we raise the question back to the institutions which are the governance institutions of the country, which is your executive, your judiciary and the legislature, to differentiate between public goods, public infrastructure, public services from private. Where it is a private dispute between him and I, the treatment should be different. But when it is impacting the economy, how do you achieve the ends of 39? The Coal Gate judgment proceeds on the principle that they are achieving the ends of 39. I ask the question, by leaving the capital stranded, by now trying to unravel through the ordinance and other routes which will always have a challenge, and years of dispute. If you have a Dabhol-like problem, you would wipe out the entire investment. You will ensure that the end-use plants will not get the coal, or they will get more expensive than possible. As a consequence, there will be impairment of investment. There will be shortages in the economy. So how are we achieving 39? How is it maximizing welfare? I think it is time that we went back and asked the courts, the legislature and the judiciary, before they take decisions like go no go, which started with a well-meaning exercise, but created a much worse license Raj than what you have seen in the last 15 years. Ad hocism to the core. Because that gentleman who decided on it is not the one who will process all the files. The man on the ground who does it couldn't care less about what the consequences are. So there is a need for accountability, there is a need for thinking on time value for money. Second principle. And a third principle, and I will not take more time. The basic conflict that comes between economics and law, and you were right, Mr. Iyer, is this. Lawyers and courts proceed on one principle amongst others called caveat emptor. Let the buyer beware. If I am selling, it's your problem to figure out what I am selling, what's its value, and whether you're getting the right thing for the right price. But economics and finance and the world knows that the world and the markets are predicated on information asymmetry. Only the person who produces and is selling knows the best value of that good. How do you make the twain meet? The arbitrage, the transaction, is where you have the shades of grey. And unless when public goods and finance and economics, where 125 crore people, their livelihood, where availability of power, water and transportation to them is in question, what is the big problem in treating them differently from a private dispute about the rent or the lease? Why cannot we stand up and say that it is not that private capital is any worse than public capital or any better than the other? Because once that money is invested in a road, in an airport, in water supply, in electricity or whatever else, it is as stranded as public. Whether NTPC produces the power and it comes to your house, or let's say Tata or Reliance or Adani, it's the same damn electricity, use it for the same purpose and you pay the price. I have not known of any electricity that comes to your house on the basis of a generator that gives you added advantages of us. So why is this differentiation? Why are we cutting our nose to spite the face? These are inputs to growth for the economy. And if they are, then what prevents us from looking at it rather than being Puritan? Now, why is it that there are two streams of judgments in the Supreme Court? Why is it that Justice Hegde in 2002 said that economic principles and management issues are beyond us? Why are there 50 judgments of the Supreme Court where they say that we don't interfere with policy because it's not our domain, it's not our strength, we don't understand it? But what stops them from getting expert testimony? When you get into a PIL, the question you asked, now why is it that the two associations were asked to present only on question of law? And when Attorney General said that the letter of assurance is a figment of imagination on a piece of paper worth nothing, on 25th August the judgment from Supreme Court comes and says, no, it is valuable. And when the same people stand up and say, look, there are so many of us, we have put in our money, we are ready to operate or we are operating, please hear us. The judge says, sorry, won't hear you. So what happened to principle of natural justice? What happened to prospective overruling? 11 judges of the Supreme Court sat in Golaknath and said that if any decision is made on the basis of existing laws and policies, which are valid, that will not be set aside. That will not be reversed in the retrospective. Why do we pick a date of 2001 or 2008 to cancel licenses? Why do we go back to historic? Why not prospectively? If I am found culpable, please hang me by the neck. But if I am not, just on a preponderance of possibilities or imagination, by cancelling everything, what are you achieving? So the proposition for you to consider is, differentiate between the capital and the person who owns it. If the person who owns it is at fault, put him at a distance, put him to scrutiny, put him to test. But for Christ's sake, the asset which is there must be used every day. It's a public good and asset. If 39 has to be given meaning, if welfare of the economy has to be seen, it is the bounden duty of the same Supreme Court to ensure that that plant, that asset is put to use every day. It is not mothballed at all. Because there's a time value for money every day that the asset is mothballed. That asset loses value. Because you have to service the debt, you have to service the equity. You are taking a vibrant, viable proposition to sickness. And that doesn't achieve Article 39. But at times, because of our strengths and weaknesses, we all play in our comfort zone. So Mr. Iyer, what you said is the point. That a judge is not trained to look at economics and policy and other things. And he needs to get the assistance. Perhaps there is a need to relook at that. Perhaps there is a need to have specialized benches. There's a need for expert testimony. Maybe judges should have a panel of experts to advise them. But be that as it may, no institution of the economy can go beyond the constitution, which starts by saying we the people of India. The courts are also created pursuant to it, and they are answerable to the welfare of the same people of India. They are a means to the end, they are not the end. Justice Jackson of US Supreme Court once said that we are infallible because we are final. We are not final because we are infallible. And that casts a larger burden on the Supreme Court. And with utmost respect, perhaps they need to relook at issues which are of this impact because they affect the economy.